All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Notary 101, Learning the Basics. Thank you for joining me today. If you would please comment or type in your name in the chat box for me for attendance purposes, I'd greatly appreciate that. As we get this started and rolling, before we begin all that kind of good stuff, rules, right? Please make sure that you stay muted as best as possible. We know sometimes it comes unmuted and whatnot, but for the sake of the presentation. And at the end, we will definitely have a Q&A session. That way you can ask whatever questions you'd like. Feel free to type the questions into the comment box. However, I won't be able to get to them until the very end anyway. So it might be a smart idea to kind of hold off until then so I don't have to scroll through all the comments. That'd be really helpful. At the end of the day, we'll get started here in a second. Now, I am Joshua Hernandez, and I am the admin for the Notary Loan Signing Agent Facebook group, or Notary Loan Signing Agent Training Facebook group, more precisely, a free resource for new notaries. I have been a notary since 2018. I was working out of Texas and currently work in Kentucky. I've worked directly with title companies and I've worked with signing services. It all just depends on where I'm at, what I'm doing, and what's going on in life. I am also a full-time military service member. I instruct at the recruiting college here in Fort Knox. So I do this on my off time, and I am really happy to help you guys, and I hope that you get benefit out of this tremendously. Okay, so let me go ahead and take my mug off of here real quick, and we'll get started. All right. So if for whatever reason you cannot see my full screen, or you see something that's interrupted, or you see the behind the scenes type of stuff, please come unmute it and let me know. Otherwise, I will keep going. I appreciate your time once again. Again, this is Notary 101, Learning the Basics. Let's go ahead and take a brief moment and talk about what this training is for. Okay. This training is a general overview of notary basics. Okay, it's intended for soon-to-be notaries, people who are not notaries just yet but want to be and kind of curious, and for the new notary, someone who's been a notary for probably less than a year and a half or a year, and kind of just doesn't have a full feel for it just yet. And it's meant to shed light on the basics of notarization. We're also meant to kind of inform, educate, and possibly, hopefully, spark future and further curiosity into the notarial world, and allow you to want to kind of pursue that just a little bit further. All right, so let's talk about what this training is not. This training is not a state-specific course, okay? We're going to be talking in generalities. We're going to be talking across the board kind of stuff. We will need to dig into your individual state if you want to know more specifics that as it pertains to you and your state, okay? This is not the course for that. But feel free to ask that in the Q&A. It's not an all-inclusive, everything about notary, okay? We're going to hit the basics. We're going to hit the meat and potatoes and the foundations of it, and then we're going to move on. It's not intended for the seasoned notary. If you've been doing notarial work for 2+ years, 3-5+ years, you may not get too much out of this training, okay? Unless you've been doing it really, really, really part-time. But I still hope you get something out of this training if you are in attendance and you are a seasoned notary. And it is not a training on signing agent items, right? We're not talking about loan signing stuff. We're not talking about anything like that, apostilles, etc. We are talking straight mobile notary or notary public basics, all right? So moving on to the next one. This training will cover what a notary does, why it matters, becoming a notary public, some laws, regulations, and best practices, E&O insurance versus surety bonds. Then we'll talk about some notarial certificates, oaths, affirmations, jurats, acknowledgements, signature witnessing, copy certifications. We'll talk about stamps, seals, and ID verification methods and journaling. I'll give you some additional resources. I do have some PDFs for you to take home with you before the course is over or the class is over. I'm not going to put them in the chat just yet because I don't want you distracted, but I have some things for you as well. And then I have a special gift for you at the very end. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what a notary does and why it matters. Notaries as public servants, okay? So let's get right to it. What is a notary public? A notary public is someone that is appointed by their state government to serve the public, all right? It's by witnessing the signing of documents and administering oaths. We're here to help deter fraud, ensure proper execution of documents, and act as an impartial third party, okay? And we do that through the process of notarization, right? We defer fraud by establishing that the signer knows what they are signing, they are willing participants of that transaction, and of course, that they are who they claim to be. So, what does a notary do? We are given authority to administer oaths, take proof of execution and acknowledgments of instruments, which are documents, right? And when we take an acknowledgement, we are certifying that the signer stood before us and we verified their identity and that the signer has professed that the signature on that document is theirs. Now, as notaries public, we have a civic duty. Okay, we are entrusted with a duty to screen signers for important documents and to verify identity of that person. We are also here to ensure, to the best of our ability, that the signer is signing something willingly and competently. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the stakes can be pretty high. There are definitely some legal and ethical consequences at stake for us as notaries and for the signers that are involved. The stakes are so high sometimes that some notarizations require that we place the signer under oath and have them declare under penalty of perjury that the information contained in the document is true and correct to the best of their knowledge. Deeds of conveyance, wills, mortgages, powers of attorney, etc. All those kind of things are just some examples of very important documents that we can handle. And as I will mention later, we must be impartial. As notaries public, we are nothing if not impartial. Remember that whole deter fraud thing? It's very important that we don't have a personal interest in the document that we are signing, right? Hence, we can never notarize our own signatures. We can't notarize the signatures of our spouses, etc., because we may have a vested interest in that. We are duty bound not to act in situations where we have a personal interest. So the public has placed its trust in our ability to not be corrupted, and we should honor that. As notaries public, we cannot discriminate. Impartiality has to go across the board, okay? We cannot refuse to serve people based on race, nationality, religion, politics, sexual orientation, or status of as a non-client, okay? Very, very important. While serving the community, we have the privilege of doing so and being a part of life-changing moments. All right, let that really sink in. New homes, new families, last wills and testaments, multi-million-dollar corporate partnerships, right? We need to know what we are doing and take our duty seriously. It's very important for everyone. Now, with COVID-19 catapulting the online notarization world into existence, our duties now extend across the globe, right? Our next client could be a military member serving overseas, needing a will. It could be a business agreement in Japan, like who knows, right? But we have the ability to assist people around the world, and that's pretty neat. So to summarize that portion, okay, a notary never really knows when their next job is going to come or where it's coming from. It could be a neighbor, it could be somebody across the globe, but in any case, we are impartial, we're trustworthy, and we are duty bound. We verify identity, competency, willingness, and signature authenticity. We pretty much make the world go round if you really think about it. So becoming a notary public, all right, how do you become one? Well, every state is slightly different, as I mentioned earlier, but luckily for us, there are some general steps that you can follow that will cover the process for most states, all right? As a courtesy, at the very end of this, I will include a PDF that has your state's notary website, which houses the requirements for your states, and it's all hyperlinked inside the paragraph or the PDF for you. Now let's talk about the general steps of becoming a notary public. All right, we'll be covering meeting your state's eligibility requirements, the application, required state training, background check, surety bonds, receiving your commission, all that kind of good stuff. All right, so let's start with number one, meeting your state's eligibility requirements. After all, there's no point in applying for something that you may not qualify for. So if you're not already a notary public, it's worthwhile looking at the requirements before assuming that you automatically qualify. Everything starts with a visit to your Secretary of State website for the state that you live in or work in. Notice I've placed live or work in bold because that's a common requirement for states. You won't be able to apply for a commission in the state that you do not live or work in, all right? This is also how most dual commissioned or multi-commissioned notaries get that status. They typically live on the border of 2 or more states, and some states allow you to hold a commission with them, even though you don't live with them or live in their state, as long as you work in their state. So that's how that little dual commission or multi-commission piece works. Although a simple Google search like Texas Secretary of State Notary, or something similar will point you in the right direction. Like I said, I'll have a PDF for you at the very end that has it hyperlinked for you for your state. So completing the application, all right. After you know that you're good for the requirements, you'll have to submit your application to the Notary's Public Department of your Secretary of State. Now, each state has their own application process. Some require surety bonds, background checks. Some require training to be completed. All of that before submitting the application, and sometimes after submitting the application. So it just depends. Others just require you to do all of the above and have it completed and registered with the county before conducting your first notarization. So it's really going to be a case-by-case basis when it comes to your state. All right, you won't know which one is your case until you read the state's application and figure out what that process is going to be based off that application. And then, of course, the costs are going to vary. So speaking of costs, the application fees from state to state will vary from $10 to $500 depending on the state. All right, but the good news is most of them are under the $100 mark. So that's a plus, I guess. All right, if your state requires you to complete training, then you'll want to make sure that the training or course that you purchase is approved. Some states don't specify. All right, don't overstress this. If your state says you need training, but they don't actually approve or give you an approved training list, then technically any course will do, right? Otherwise, you want to make sure that you are taking a course that the state has already approved for the Secretary of State, if that makes sense. All right. If not, I also recommend that you start with the National Notary Association's course and then kind of expand outward from there. And on another hand, some states require title insurance producer courses, right? Like an independent contractor course. So if you're one of those states, then lucky you, more knowledge for you. So I'm sure you're curious as to which states, require the training or exam or both kind of things. So I've listed them right there on your screen for you. Indiana is definitely, I'm pretty sure, a title insurance producer state. And I want to say Maryland as well, but the rest of them I don't remember off the top of my head. But these definitely require some sort of exam or require training before becoming a commissioned notary public. All right, and that brings us to the requirement for fingerprints and or background checks. So all states will require a background check, with most of them being through fingerprints, okay? You will also need a background check if you want to be a signing agent. Now, I know that we're not talking signing agent stuff in this class, but it's worth knowing that your fingerprint background check for becoming a commissioned notary public is not the same thing as your background check for becoming a signing agent, all right? I just want to make that little note out there for you. I recommend that you use the National Notary Association's background check for the signing method or the signing agent piece. Because it's the most widely used and accepted amongst all those companies. But just so that way background check fingerprints for commissioning, not the same as signing agent. So let's talk surety bonds. A surety bond protects the public from any wrongdoing that you happen to do, okay? It doesn't ever cover you, it covers the public. All right, there's a separate insurance policy that protects you as the notary, but the surety bond is not it. All right, the amount of the policy required will vary from state to state and can range from $1,000 to $20,000. It's important to note that the amount of the policy is not the actual cost for holding the policy. Okay, for example, in my state of Kentucky, we are required to hold a $1,000 surety bond, which costs roughly about $56 a year with the company that I currently use. So you can scale up with a lot of money for surety bond, but that doesn't mean that's what you're actually paying, okay? Now, receiving your commission, it's always fun and exciting. All right, so once you're at this stage, congratulations are definitely in order. You're officially a notary public. More than likely, you'll have to go and visit your local county clerk or parish and register with them, take an oath of office. But keep in mind, some states will send an actual certificate in the mail, and others will just email you a PDF of it for you to print out. So reading your application in full will usually kind of shed light as to which one your state's going to do. Now let's talk a little bit about laws, regulations, and best practices. You need to learn them is pretty much the bottom line. All right, learn your state's laws. State laws and regulations define what a notary can do legally. All right, they also define what notaries are prohibited from doing. So remember that whole deter fraud thing. This is part of that, okay? Now, no matter what extra hat you wear, all right, when you're notarizing, you are always a notary first. If you're doing signings, you're still a notary first. If you're doing inspections, you're still a notary first, okay? You can't get away from that piece. Some states have restrictions on witnesses or, fee charges for notarizations, journal requirements, all that kind of good stuff, and it varies from state to state. So you need to read your state's laws, their statutes or regulations, and most states have a primer that kind of summarizes it all, almost like a handbook, all right? So definitely look into that for your state. I would not recommend going full throttle with notarizations without knowing this. Now, what a notary is not. In some countries, a notary serves as an attorney, right, or a judge or some kind of high-ranking official, but not in the United States. Okay, when we translate our title for marketing purposes, sometimes we get that mixed up, right? So I was originally a notary in Texas, and I'm from South Texas. Okay, so lots of Spanish. In Mexico, a notary public is also a lawyer or has the power of a lawyer, right? But obviously not in the U.S. So when we use a marketing term to market to that demographic down there, right, we cannot use notario público because that it loses its translation or loses its meaning from what we actually do to what is interpreted, all right, and it infers that we're a lawyer and we're not. So this is a very important thing because we live in a diverse country, and so when immigrants speak to you, right, they may automatically be thinking about their countries or their home country's notary public. And it's very important that you know what you can and cannot do. That way you can also properly advise them and keep that in mind. Now, you are also not biased, right? You're a neutral third party, and you're not a detective. All right, you are around to deter fraud of identity and competence and all that, but you're not there to figure out if a contract that someone is signing is 100% legal or smart, okay? Stay in your lane. Your job is to ensure identification, make sure that person who's signing is doing it willingly and is competent. And this is different from hey, I think this is a shady thing. That's a different story. I'm talking about you see a document that you've never seen before. It's handwritten, it's whatever. Your job is not to say, oh, this is, how do I know this is legal? You're not a lawyer, okay? Your job is to, hey, as long as the notarial certificate is correct and the person signing and what they're testing to is legal and all that, you're fine. Keep on going, okay? Stay in your lane. You're a notary. All right, unauthorized practice of law. You should be scared of this, right? It's a scary thing. While a notary must possess a thorough background check a thorough background of their state's laws, they should never really hold themselves out to be a lawyer, okay? We can explain what, not why, and not how. So if you ever wondered why we cannot tell or suggest or recommend whether a signer needs a jurat or an acknowledgement, this is why. You would be practicing law, and that would be an unauthorized practice of law because you're not a lawyer. So keep that piece in mind. What you can do is describe the purpose of a jurat or acknowledgement, and then let the signer know or ask the signer which one they would want you to do based on those descriptions. And while we're on the unauthorized items, right, let's talk about some unauthorized things you can do. I'll also be giving you a PDF of a quick little cliff notes of notary no-nos at the end of this class as well. So kind of help you out with some of the smaller stuff. But you cannot engage in UPL, unauthorized practice of law. Just want to throw that out there one more time for good measure. You cannot engage in false or deceptive advertising, right? That's the whole notary public in another language kind of thing. You cannot sign a blank notarial certificate, right? So in your notarial certificate, there are certain elements in there, and those elements need to be filled out, right? The date, the signer's name, all that kind of good stuff. You cannot just simply sign and stamp a notarial certificate and give it to somebody. That is huge no-no and very illegal. A notary cannot notarize a document if the language in the certificate does not reflect the proper notarial act. All right, and if you're taking the 201 course that's happening tomorrow, you'll get a little bit more insight as to what that means, all right? Now, you're also not able to authenticate or validate objects. So if I brought you a pencil, right, and said, hey, I need you to notarize that this is in fact a pencil, you can't do that. But what you can do is you can notarize someone's statement attesting that they believe that's a pencil or that that's a pencil. Does that make sense? But you cannot actually notarize saying, yep, that is a pencil. You can't do that. You can't notarize or you can't authenticate or validate objects, all right? Same thing with IDs. You can't validate that that ID is correct as a notarial act. But if someone is saying, hey, this is my ID, I swear by it, blah, 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 and they sign it, and this is a true copy of my ID, you can notarize their signature of them acknowledging that that's their ID, all right? A notary may not fill out a notarial certificate with information that the notary knows is false, right? If you know that the information in there is not accurate, the date, the whatever, then you're not able to notarize that. A notary cannot proceed with a notarization if they think or feel strongly that the transaction is illegal. All right, go with your gut sometimes. If you don't feel this is right, then go ahead and refuse it. You have every right to do so. And if you do so, please acknowledge that in your journal as well. A notary must refuse to notarize if the signer appears confused or mentally incapable of understanding the document or transaction. All right, there's a lot of stories that go around for that. Most notaries who do hospital work are usually in this line of fire. There's usually last minute, hey, deathbed kind of, medical powers of attorney, last will and testaments, etc. If your signer is heavily drugged or, does not seem all there, you need to be aware of that. They need to be mentally capable of being competent and understanding what they're doing. All right. So let's talk a little bit about E&O insurance. Okay. And surety bonds. So you already know that being a notary is kind of a big deal, all right? Even when you're dealing with a one-page document and your fee is nominal, providing notary services can be a far-reaching legal consequence for everybody involved in the transaction. So let's look at some steps that you can take to protect yourself in case you ever make an honest mistake, because those do happen, all right? So a notary bond. It's also known as a surety bond because, you buy them from a surety company. Kind of makes more sense now, huh? A notary bond or surety bond is like a line of credit that protects the public and the customers, and your customers, really. And if you ever need to use it, you will have to pay it back, okay? Almost like a bail bond, They got you out of jail and all that, but you still got to pay that money back. So it provides an option for redress if you harm a customer financially, right? So if you harm the public financially or a customer, they can at least get some kind of redress out of that. Now, how do you obtain a notary bond? Aside from a surety bond agency, you can purchase one from an insurance provider, but you have to be careful, right? Make sure that it's a legitimate insurance company and not some old rinky-dink, made up fabricated one. It has to be legal and legitimate, obviously. The last thing you want is for a customer to need them and they can't honor their claims. So make sure that you're buying from a licensed agency or insurance company with a good reputation. You can use a variety of them. We have a merchant bonding company, etc. You can even use like State Farm or things that you're already or insurance companies you're already familiar with. So how much will it cost you? It all really depends on your state and the company that you use, right? Most states will give you some kind of minimum bond amount. In Kentucky, my minimum bond amount is $1,000 and it costs about $50. So, for whatever that matters to you. Now let's talk about E&O insurance. All right, do you need E&O insurance? No, not unless your state requires it. But yes, you should strongly consider having E&O insurance. So E&O stands for errors and omissions. Okay, this is a liability insurance for notaries to ensure that you are covered if you are ever sued by a customer. So it comes in handy for any kind of unintentional notarial mistakes, and the customer loses money because of that. So just like other insurances, if you use it, you don't have to pay it back. All right. And it will cover up to whatever the amount of that policy is. So that's why you always see those discussions on the boards talking about $25,000 worth versus $100,000 versus $1 million, etc. That's what that insurance policy is talking about. So where can you purchase one? You can purchase E&O insurance from any kind of commercial insurance provider, Bibberk, Hiscox, the merchant bonding company, State Farm, etc. The NNA also offers some coverage. The application process involves asking questions about your previous claims or lawsuits, how big your company is, are you a sole proprietor, what other actions do you do? Do you also do inspections? Do you also do real estate? Do you also do et cetera? And then they'll give you a quote based off of that. Just answer truthfully, no matter what company you go to, and you'll avoid any issues in the future. Do not try to do the car insurance thing where, Geico asks you if you've ever done a defensive driving course. And if you have, we'll give you a discount. And you're inclined to say yes, because you don't have to provide proof. But if you ever get into a wreck and they have to pay out a claim, what do you think they're going to ask you for? They're going to ask you to prove everything that you used on your application. Same concept here. All right. Truth is definitely the way to go. Also, you're a notary public. You should be telling the truth. That's part of our thing. All right, so keep that piece in mind as well. All right, so how much does E&O cost? Just like everything else, it's going to vary, man. You'd be looking at $20 to $150 a year, depending on the coverage that you want, the level that you want, what you're doing as a company, the company that you use. All that will affect the cost of this. So let's compare a bond and an E&O insurance. Yeah, let's do that. Notary bonds are required by the state. All right, to get your commission. E&O is optional. Notary bonds protect customers and the public from your actions. E&O protects you from your own actions. Notary bonds will be reimbursed. They'll need to be paid or reimbursed and paid after the. Let me restart my train of thought here. Notary bonds, all right, will have to be paid back, okay, but not insurance. The E&O insurance does not have to be paid back. The bonds do. All right. After you pay back your bond, right, you have to reapply and all that kind of good stuff for the insurance piece. If you ever get a payout, just like regular insurance, right, your premium will probably go up. So now let's move on to types of notarizations. All right, there are 5 common types of notarizations: acknowledgements, jurats, oaths, affirmations, and copy certifications. We're going to start off with oaths and affirmations. And the reason for that is because we're going to see them again here shortly. Oaths and affirmations. Let's break this down. An oath is a solemn pledge to a supreme being. Okay, that's the I swear to God kind of thing. An affirmation is a solemn pledge on an individual's personal honor, right? So that's why you'll hear the terms, do you solemnly swear or affirm? These two types of notarizations are often confused with the term jurat. And although they are in a jurat, all right, they can also be standalone and not part of any kind of written down certificate. So you can simply verbally administer an oath or affirmation orally instead of having to make it part of an affidavit or a jurat. So I think courtroom, right, where they swear somebody in, but they're not writing anything down. That's what this is talking about, oaths and affirmations. All right, so now let's talk about jurats, acknowledgements, signature witnessing, and copy certifications. All right, acknowledgements, they ensure a signer is who they claim to be and voluntarily signed the document. All right, so to perform an acknowledgement, the signer must appear before you, be identified, and declare or acknowledge that the signature on the document is theirs. They do not have to sign in front of you. Okay, usually. And there's an exception, but 90% of the time, right, that little verbiage is not in that certificate, so you're good. If you signed up for my next class, you'll see what I'm talking about when I show you the examples and where that exception would be. But for the most part, 90% of the time, an acknowledgement, someone can come to you with a document already signed, and as long as you ask them, hey, is that your signature? And they say yes, right, you're good. You don't have to witness a signature on the acknowledgement. Jurats, they require the signer to be put under oath or an affirmation that the contents of a document are true to the best of their knowledge, all right, under penalty of perjury. So a jurat can also be known as an affidavit or a verification on oath in some states. So to perform a jurat, the signer must appear before you. They have to have their identity verified. You have to sign in your presence and get administered an oath or affirmation. So you have to hear the signer promise that the statements in the document are true to the best of their knowledge, and it has to be under penalty of perjury, right? And you have to actually witness them signing. They have to sign in front of you. They cannot bring you a document already signed. Okay, you have to correct it. Signature witnessing, all right, is exactly what it sounds like. you are witnessing a signature. You are certifying that the individual that appeared before you, that their ID was verified, and that the signature on the record or document or whatever it is the signature of that person. Okay. Copy certifications simply certifies that this copy is an exact reproduction of whatever the original was. Okay. Most states don't allow it. Some will allow it, but with some restrictions, like Texas and Florida. They don't allow it for vital records like birth certificates, death certificates, things like that. So that is definitely a state by state kind of thing. Now let's talk stamps and seals. Okay. When you hear notaries public talk about stamps, and or seals, they are usually referring to the same thing, right? And they're talking about the device that marks or embosses a notarized document and has all of your commission information. Okay, so two things here. One, stamp, right, is the ink stamping device that you are seeing on the left-hand side. Okay, seal is usually referring to the embosser that you see on the right-hand side. Now, when you talk legal definitions, it's usually referring to a physical image that's affixed to or embossed on a tangible record, right? So most secretaries of state use the phrase like stamping device to refer to the actual, physical stamp that you see on the left-hand side. Some states don't even require a stamping device. But if you choose to use one, then your state, probably has some sort of specifications for you to follow. But it's very important. All these words typically get used interchangeably. All right. So if you're talking with a Secretary of State or reading a document from the Secretary of State and they use the word stamp or seal, they are usually referring to the actual image or raised image that you see right there in the middle. Okay. If you're talking to a notary public, they're typically talking about the actual stamp, the physical little stamp and the embosser. Okay. So keep that in the front of your mind as well. So ID verification and journaling, everybody's favorite part. When it comes to methods of identification, there are three more common ones, okay? One is using a valid form of government ID, and that's the most typical, right? It must be valid, unexpired, it typically needs to show a signature and a photo, etc. And your state will outline those specifics, okay? Most U.S. government IDs, state IDs, and all that are able to be used, or a combination thereof, depending on what your state allows. Okay, some states allow you to do so as long as you feel comfortable and understand that that's actually the person who they claim to be. And some are more strict, so state by state. But typically, that is the easiest form of identification. Second one would be personal knowledge. That's the next common. This is where a notary personally knows the person signing and thus can establish identification accurately. Okay. Use of a credible witness is the last kind of line of defense that we use. This is where a notary uses a third party to kind of vouch for the signer. So say that your signer doesn't have an ID and you don't personally know the signer either. Okay, you can use a credible witness. Now, you can place that witness under oath and have them swear that the signer is who they claim to be, but this also varies state by state. All right, some states like Pennsylvania require that the notary personally know the credible witness. And then some states like Florida permit up to 2 witnesses that don't know the notary, but that they do know the signer and can produce a verifiable ID. So basically, as long as the notary can verify that stranger is a person and the ID that they have is them and all that kind of good stuff, they can use them as a credible witness for their signer. So definitely another thing to hopefully entice you to read your state laws. Now let's talk about journals. Some states require notaries public to keep a journal for all of their notarizations for future use in court. Okay, some of them are required to keep them for 3 years, others for 10 years. It just varies state by state. Even if your state doesn't require it, it is very, very smart and a good best practice to keep one anyway. Okay, your state may refer to the journal as a record book, a log book, or a register. Each time that you notarize, you'll have to make a log with some state required information like the signer's name, address, date, time of the notarization, location of the notarization, the fee that was charged, the method of ID verification, the type of notarization, all that kind of good stuff gets logged. These journals are state or public inspectable items. So you usually have to keep them, like I said, 3 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be, or archived. And you have to have a plan in place in the event that you pass away. There is somebody who is able to, put those journals to the state. So putting this all together, okay, kind of a Cliff Notes bottom line up front kind of approach. All right. So someone comes to you saying they need a document notarized. All right. You're doing three things. All right. One, you're analyzing the document, checking for notarial verbiage, etc., making sure that it's a document that you can notarize. Two, you're ensuring that the signer is physically in front of you. You're verifying their identification. You're assessing whether the signer is competent and willing. And then three, you're logging it in your journal and you're notarizing. That's basically what it all boils down to. Everything additional that comes from the whole process is usually just trying to satisfy those three requirements. All right, so I hope that kind of breaks it down for you and makes it a little simpler to understand. That's really all you're doing. Checking the documents, making sure the verbiage is correct and legal, ensuring the person is who they say they are, they're competent and willing, and they're physically in front of you. And then after you do your notarization, or right before, you're journalizing, you're putting it in your journal and you're making the notarization itself. Now, let's talk about additional resources. What I'm going to be giving you, and I'll throw it in the chat here in a second before we get to the Q&A. I'll give you a glossary of terms that I completely, definitely stole from the NNA. I'll give you a PDF of little notary no-nos, and I'll give you a PDF that's hyperlinked to all the Secretary of State's notary websites. And I almost stole that from the NNA, but as I was going through to make sure each one worked, some of them weren't working anymore. So congratulations, you have a more updated version than the NNA one. You're welcome. All right, now, my next class is going to be Notary 201, which is tomorrow, and it covers insurance bonds, notarial certificate elements, examples, etc. We're doing a more of an in-depth, deep dive on both of those, but more specifically on the notarial pieces, right? Because there are elements to each notarial certificate that need to be in place and filled out correctly. So I'll be showing you examples, how to fill them out, what they look like, all those kind of things tomorrow is what we're doing. So hopefully you're registered for that next class. If you're not registered for that next class and you would like to see the replay, then go ahead and just get one of those. And before we get to the Q&A, I do have a special gift for you for attending this class live, and I truly appreciate that. I'd like to give you a discount code for the Notary 201 and 202's replay in the event that you're not registered for it or that you miss it and you just want that in-depth knowledge. All you have to do, all right, to get 90% off of that bad boy is to go into the Facebook group after this, after we're completely done, post your thoughts on this training. Not necessarily good or bad, just your thoughts on it. If it happens to be great, awesome. If it happens to be horrible, that's okay too. All right, tag me in it, and then I'll PM you with a code that gives you 90% off of the replay for both Notary 201 and 202's courses. All right. So now, without further ado, we'll get to the Q&A. So give me 1 second. Let me stop sharing. Here we go. All right. And we are back. Let me exit out of all this stuff and get that away from my computer so you can have my full attention. And to the chat. All right. So Q&A. Who has questions? Feel free to raise your hand if I can see it on there, and or type in the chat what your question may be. And let me see if I can change this to a gallery mode. Now let's go back to speaker. Boom. All right.
I have a question.
Okay. Ms. Shavana, go ahead.
How do you know which training is state approved?
So anything that's going to be, anything that requires a state approval is usually listed with the Secretary of State, all right, the Notary Department. Not always, but usually. That's where I would start first. And if you don't have one there, I would reach out to the people who are giving the course and ask them if they are. And then I would verify that with the Secretary of State Notary Public unit or office or whomever is in charge of that little division. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. All right, no problem. All right. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Danny, go ahead.
Hey, okay, so the stamp, I have a round stamp. Is it like, does it matter if I have the round stamp versus the one you showed, the more rectangular, or similar to
Ooh, man, you wasted your money on that stamp. No, I'm just kidding. It's perfectly fine. It is perfectly fine. It's all preference, okay? As long as your state, because your state will have regulations and requirements, right? Some states are like, hey, it has to be, if it's going to be rectangle, it has to be these dimensions. If it's going to be a circle, it has to be this circumference, and so on and so forth. So as long as it abides by that, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is, okay? Now, my recommendation, for everybody, no matter whether you're doing general notary work, you're doing signing agent stuff, you're doing whatever, my recommendation is that you order a mini stamp, okay? It's a rectangular but much smaller stamp than the standard size stamps, because they fit into more nooks and crannies on most documents, and it has tend to be a lot more convenient over the years. So just my 2 cents. All right. Miss Becky, can you unmute and ask, because my eyesight is not great and I have this big bright light shining over here the whole time, so it's not pretty. Is that Becky?
Yep. Can
Yep.
you hear me okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm kind of confused when it comes, because I've only notarized one document and it was easy. It was a 1-pager. But if someone comes to you with a document that they say, I need this notarized, and it's, page upon page of things, do we just read through it and then make sure all of like any blank spaces or blanks where it should be signed are all filled in? And then if we see that that's all done, then we can fill out our certificate?
Sort of. If it's general notary work, it's typically not going to be your responsibility to ensure everything's signed, right? Because most people think signing agent when it comes to that. Now, you have to read your part, the notarial part, and then the person that you're signing read their piece as well. Your notarial certificate will typically tell you whether they need to, swear to whatever the information's in there is correct, which means that document has to typically be filled out, or it's just acknowledging that their signature was on there and it's not having them swear that the document's accurate. So your piece of the pie is going to depend on what that notarial certificate says. Right? If it's just an acknowledgement and you're just acknowledging that that is them, that's their signature, so they sign it and that document is open, you're not doing anything illegal by not having everything filled out, and you're not doing anything unethical by not having anything filled out, because all you're doing, your purpose of that notarization is just to acknowledge that that person is who they are and that's their signature, right?
Okay.
If it's a jurat and you're doing some kind of oath and they are swearing that everything in that document is accurate to the best of their knowledge, etc., and that document has a whole bunch of blank spaces and unanswered stuff or whatever the case may be, you're gonna have to make a judgment call. You can read through it and whatnot. You're not gonna be held liable for it. You're still gonna just hold the person under oath, saying that everything in there is accurate to the best of their knowledge. So that's kind of like the gray line that you're gonna have to figure out. I would not overthink that, because again, you stay in your lane, right? It's better to have as much of that document filled out as possible when you're notarizing it. But unless you are notarizing, if your notarial certificate says that you're notarizing 2 people's signature and there's only 1 person there, you either need to correct the notarial certificate or you need to say, hey, where's the other person, right? But all that's going to be a judgment call. I would not stress it. At the end of the day, whatever your notarial certificate is having you do is what you need to care about.
Okay, and they get to choose which certificate? They
have to choose. All right. If the certificate is no longer, if the certificate is not on the document that they present you, right, and you have to provide your own loose leaf certificate, then they have to choose. You cannot guide them. You cannot say, oh, you need a blah 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 blah, because that would be the unauthorized practice of law.
Okay. Would you say that they usually come with the certificate that they need?
Most,
is it more rare that they need
most
one?
do. Yeah, it is very rare from my experience anyway. I mean, it could be completely different from somebody else in another area. But everyone that I've done is usually a form. It's a standard practice form that people have to use, right? Even ones that are not needing to be notarized, like I-9s, and they just need a notary public to just kind of make sure that's done correctly. But it usually comes with its own verbiage, right? Very rare to have to attach a loose leaf. As a matter of fact, I printed out like 20 of them, right? 20 jurats, 20 acknowledgements since I got here in Kentucky in 2020 at the end. And I think I still have some left. Like that's how rare it is, right?
Oh, okay.
But even at that, right, it's usually for written statements or personal statements or whatever that the signer typed up themselves. So again, at that point, you just say, hey, this is what a jurat is. This is what an acknowledgement is. Which one do you want? And then they choose.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, good question.
Perfect, thanks.
No problem. Anybody else?
Hi, Josh.
Hi, how's it going? It's Deidre?
Deidre.
Deidre. I was close.
That's all right. So I have a question.
Yes.
So I am considering switching my E&O insurance because I found out that the policy I have doesn't cover loan signings.
Mhm.
So I was just curious to know, like, let's say, God forbid, I was ever, sued. Would my old policy still cover me during the time frame that I was covered under that particular policy if I did switch to a new company?
Yes. Whatever company you had at the time of the incident is the one that they're going to use.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Now you got everybody scared. Like, hey, does my policy?
No, I was just curious.
Now keep this in mind, guys. So every policy is different. Just like car insurance, just like life insurance, all that. They have some good foundations that are the same, but each company is gonna do things slightly differently. It is worthwhile asking if they cover signing agent stuff, right? I know Biberk does, but don't necessarily think that yours doesn't already, right? Make sure you check with them and ask, because a lot of them specifically say, hey, we cover the Notarial Act, which when you're doing signing agent stuff, you do a lot of notarial acts. But they also cover extra stuff, right, around that may actually still include the signing agent stuff. It's just not labeled that way. So have that conversation with your E&O insurance companies and then make a determination from there for sure.
So, quick question with that. I got all my stuff. I signed up and did all my training and everything with the NNA.
Mhm.
So do you know any have insight on that?
Say that one more time.
I went through my trainings and everything, the background check and my insurance through the NNA. So do you have any insight with them that the insurance covers?
I don't know. I haven't gone through them for insurance in a minute. I don't know if they still use the merchant bonding company or if they've gone to someone else. Anybody else in here know by chance? But I don't personally know, Danny. I'm sorry.
Bonding.
What's that, Becky?
They still use merchant bonding.
There you go. Merchant bonding company. I would feel safe with whatever the NNA has. They've been a really good resource and voice for decades. So that's why it's really good to use what they got as a good measuring stick. So yeah, I'd say you'd be good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else with any other questions? Oh man.
It's me again. I saw a post saying about what was it when doing the loan signings? You had stated something. I wish I can go back to the post.
I say a lot of things, Danny, so I don't know. I do a lot of posts on there.
Right. Okay, so I have not done loan signings yet. I just kind of been sticking to my general notary work. Like I do notaries more. So kind of still a little hesitant because I want to feel more secure with it. So I'm taking these trainings. But you did state that what did you say? Oh, you feel like we should go branch off versus going into like signing like companies or whatever.
Yep.
So before, see now, I should just go just representing myself. I shouldn't even go through the companies.
You can do both. I mean, there's no law or rule saying which one to start with, right, or to end with. Doing both doesn't hurt. I would say use the signing companies to get your feet wet. Best case scenario, you do great, you learn everything, it's all good. Worst case scenario, you mess up on one or two and nothing like illegal kind of thing, but you mess up and you have to go correct it or whatever. But it gives you exposure, and any kind of reputation ruining that you fear only happens with a signing agency and not with the local title company, right? But I'll tell you this: anytime that you can cut out the middleman, that means more money in your pocket, right? And this is also a relationship business. So you can have a relationship, a functioning relationship and a productive one with a signing service. Sure. You can also have one with a title company. I will tell you this, if you build a relationship with a title company and times get tough, right? Recession hits or whatever the case may be, a title company is going to think a lot harder on not giving you work and making sure that you're the notary and all that based on your relationship, right? How they know that you work, how they know you personally, all that kind of good stuff. A signing agency has a higher chance of, because you're in a signing agency, a notary is a dime a dozen. They have a higher chance of like, well, who's available right now, kind of thing. The loyalty factor is a little thinner, in my opinion, with the signing agency piece. So, to answer your question, coming straight out the gate, I would try to do both. Start with the signing services. Also, try to go out there and meet some title people. Be honest. Let them know that you're new. It's okay. Some of them might say, hey, we don't work with new ones. That's fine. Still build that relationship. Other ones might give you a chance later on or take you under their wing. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So by the time, the more people you talk to, the more you'll figure it out.
Right. Got you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Nobody?
Oh, yeah. When will you do another mock signing?
So I don't know. Whatever my Calendly link has, I think it's at the end of the month, or maybe it's in the beginning of May. I have no idea. I kind of just popped it in there for whatever I had available based on my real job. So you just kind of have to go on that link and find out what that opening's going to be. But
Okay.
Yeah, set aside about an hour because we'll have to go over the documents and look at all that and whatnot. Also, if you're looking for explanation on the documents, aside from what I've recommended in the group, right, coast to coast signings on YouTube, all that, in the group itself, if you go to the media section, look at the videos, the very first video is like a 2-hour session of me and John Holder going over the refinance documents, the closing disclosure, Patriot Act form, the note, the mortgage, all that kind of stuff. So that might help you get your feet wet first.
Okay. I will definitely look into that.
All righty. All right.
What link do we look for on Facebook to find out when you'll do the mock signing?
It's a Calendly link. It's floating around in one of those in a few of those posts. I'll post one after we're done here, and I'll just make a post of it, and you guys can pop on there. But it's my Calendly link. I want to say it's calendly.com/Joshua J or Joshua J Online or something like that. You know what? Let me see if I can just post it on the comment section here, the chats here. Ooh, that reminds me. I almost left you guys without dropping little PDFs, man. Hold on one second. Let's see. Can I do this? There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. All right, let me grab that Calendly link real quick. And here we are. There you go. And that should bring up whatever my piece is. Now, the mock signings, I want to say I moved to charging for those because of the amount of stand-ups. So sorry for that, guys. But I mean, it is what it is. The 30-minute mentorship, though, that's still free. So feel free to do that. Everybody needs some sort of mentorship, and it definitely should be free. So feel free to do that one as well. Any other questions, guys? Don't feel rushed or anything. Ask me whatever you want to ask.
I only see the one link for the Calendly. Did you put the other links in there?
That one takes you to all the ones I have open. So it'll take you to an option for the mock signing and for the free mentorship.
Okay.
And then you
And
just choose
just
which
what
one.
about the PDF? You said you were gonna put a PDF in there or something?
Yeah, that should be in the chat. Everybody see those? I put 3 of them in there. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate you.
I don't see them.
That was the yeah, okay.
What
You don't
time
see
did
them?
you put them in?
7:53.
I don't see them either. I just see the calendar.
Yeah, they're not there.
Yeah, they were before the Calendly for sure. No?
No, they're
No.
not in this. It's what the lady said, and then you drop the link.
Sarah sees them. All right, there's no problem. PM me and I'll send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, feel free to hop off. And thank you so much for joining me. If you do have questions, I'll stay on towards the end just in case you were too embarrassed to ask or what have you. But thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys tomorrow.
Thanks again.